I'm the dude. So that's what you call me.
Are you a virgin?
Yeah, not since I was 10.
Are you there, God? It's me, Margaret.
Come out to the coast. We get together, have a few laughs.
Gentlemen, you can't fight in here. This is the war room.
Can I return it if it doesn't fit?
It always fits. Eventually.
Welcome back to Movie Mingle and our 5th episode now.
5 already.
And we're doing Fight Club.
Yay.
Yay, Fight Club. Woo. We all love Fight Club.
Do we?
It's a masterpiece. And
it
totally holds up in
does
2024.
Oh, God, sure, maybe.
I mean, there's a lot to unpack with this movie. Culturally, how it still is impacting, according to a bunch of people who I have no idea what their names are, but I've been told it's a bunch. But 1999, this movie came out.
Yeah, this film is so 90s it fucking hurts me.
Yeah, it's more 90s than The Matrix, which came out the same year.
Yeah, this movie is so 90s that I'm surprised it's not having a resurgence by a bunch of tweens right now, but thankfully it's not because, oh boy.
Yeah, we definitely don't need another resurgence of like some new version of Fight Club.
We don't need another generation of men thinking that this movie is in any way acceptable. Our producer Robin is currently attacking us viciously from underneath the table. Just in case you hear any bangs and bops, producer Robin is apparently a big fan of Fight Club.
He's a fighter for sure.
He's a fighter for sure.
25 years since this movie came out. Surprisingly good CGI, I thought, for 99. I remember...
Really?
For 99, I remember...
Really?
I remember when I saw this movie, I was like, oh, wow, that's some really cool CGI.
Because when we were watching
dated.
it yesterday, that opening sequence made me want to just bail then and there. The CG was so bad in it.
But they weren't doing that back then. Like, that was... Fight Club was pretty new when it came to all
Every
those
movie
swooping...
in the 90s had that, like, big opening, swoopy, like, all the X-Men movies start that way.
Yeah, but that's post-99.
Oh, fuck, you're right.
I would also like to say that I don't think this is Chuck Palahniuk, the writer of the Fight Club novel. This is not his best work by far. If I were to rank some Chuck Palahniuk books real quick, I would say my number 1 is Choke, followed by Survivor, Rant, Lullaby, Invisible Monsters, and then maybe Fight Club. But he's got dozens of books. And
As we are recording this, Caveman is literally sitting next to a shelf filled with nothing but Chuck Palahniuk books. You've met him twice? 3 times?
Probably half a dozen by now.
Yeah, you've gotten some really fun pictures with him. We have a signed copy of Fight Club 2, a comic book that came out.
It was pre-COVID for sure.
Yeah, it was pre-COVID, but so, you know, mid 2010s, Fight Club 2, a graphic novel came out, and we have a signed copy of it hanging on our wall. I see this particular copy every single day because it sits right next to the couch.
And it's beautiful.
It is beautiful, actually. It's really beautifully done watercolor by
David Mack.
Yep.
Who does a lot of watercolors for Marvel and DC and other comic book he's a very talented comic book artist.
Didn't you meet Chuck Palahniuk again, like, as recent as last fall?
Yes, for his newest book that came out.
Yeah. You went and got
comes by. He's kind of a local.
He's kind of a local.
And so whenever he does tours, he always swings by
somewhere local to us.
Local to us, and so it's always fun to go meet him. And you know, of course, his career took off because of this movie. Fight Club was his first novel, and then almost immediately after, I want to say he wrote maybe a couple other books until Fight Club was turned into a film. But he's been a writer for since 1996, I think.
Is Chuck Palahniuk a nice man?
He is a very, very nice guy to meet. Whenever he does his book tours, you will see just a massive line of people waiting to see him. It takes a long time to get to him because he spends time, even at the end of the line, when everybody's been standing around, when he's been at it for 5 hours, he'll take the time to say hello and sign things and personalize things and take pictures with you, and
Always very silly pictures.
he puts you in headlocks because of how popular Fight Club is, and how he's rolling with it, with how popular it made him, or how good it was for his career. And so yeah, he put me in a headlock. I have a couple of different pictures of him putting me in a headlock and
Choking you.
Oh yeah, and he didn't just kind of pose for the photo. He was legitimately choking me. I could feel the oxygen leaving because he had his bicep around my neck. And
Did you like it?
a little bit. He's a really great guy, and I really enjoyed meeting him every time I get to see him.
Well, I'm glad that you've gotten to experience that. And I guess if you listeners ever have a chance to meet Chuck Palahniuk and want to get, strangled by a celebrity, there's your chance.
My favorite of his books, Choke, was also turned into a movie. This one was directed by Clark Gregg.
Our beloved Agent Coulson.
Yes, for those of you who don't know who Clark Gregg is, he did play Agent Coulson in Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and many, many MCU films.
Our sweet boy. We love him so much.
May he rest in peace.
Agent Coulson.
Agent Coulson,
not Clark
Gregg.
Gregg. Clark Gregg is thankfully still kicking.
But fun movie. I think Fight Club was the better adaptation. If you want to go from book to film adaptation, I think Fight Club did a better job all around.
I believe even Chuck Palahniuk thinks that it's an improvement on his book.
It's an improvement on his book, but there are a lot of things that they left out, which I think may have been important to keep in, to not make some of these, some people now who really took the film a different way. Before we even start talking about the movie itself, Maggie, what do you think? What did you, you don't have to give me your 5-star review yet. But I'm just wondering what your overall thoughts were. A quick summary of your thoughts, because this isn't the first time you've seen this movie, but it's been a while since you've seen it.
It's been so long since I've seen it. My thoughts of rewatching this one were just, I didn't want to watch it. Fight Club is one of those, like, my reaction to watching this movie again wasn't exactly a good one. I wasn't thrilled about the prospect of watching it again. It's one of those films that I saw it after it came out on DVD way back when. I probably enjoyed it then for being, surreal and subversive and just being something that nobody had ever seen before. But now, I don't know, with the way that the world has changed, with the way that the air around this movie has changed, with, the fans of this film and how they've changed. I don't know. I wasn't thrilled. I think I was looking forward to seeing the progression of two characters, which were Bob and Marla. And Marla being the more important one because she's the only female character in this movie. I wanted to see how she held up more than anything. I wanted to see whether or not Marla had any of her own agency, or if she was just some manic pixie daydream girl for cokeheads. And spoiler alert, she wasn't much more than that. So yeah, I wasn't exactly thrilled to be watching this film. I was not sober watching this film, but I watched it and I wrote down notes and I have thoughts and feelings.
The first character we meet in the opening of the film, besides the narrator, which they call Edward Norton's character, he doesn't have a name. Every time you see him, he's got a different name. Every therapy session he goes into, it says, "Hello, my name is," and it's a different name every time.
I just wrote down in my notes, Ed Nortz. Ed Nortz.
I mean, Edward is an easier one than the narrator every time to write in your notes. But other than the narrator and Tyler Durden, at the beginning, the first character we really run into is Bob. Bob had bitch tits.
Oh, bitch tits is such a degrading term.
It's such a 90s term,
Oh,
too.
it's such a 90s term. It's such a 90s male way of describing anything that,
Right. Hey, you got bitch tits.
No, you're bitch tits.
You got bigger bitch tits. Right? And now we've kind of just man boobs or moobs.
Yeah.
I like moobs.
I like moobs, too.
And, of course, Bob is played by Meatloaf.
Meatloaf, who would do
anything. He
would do anything for love, but not get a COVID shot. And now we don't have Meatloaf in our lives anymore. And I'm going to go ahead and say it. Why'd you have to be so stupid, Meatloaf? He was a good actor. He's the only redeemable character in this whole film. I found that every time he was on screen, I actually paid attention and cared about his character. His character had empathy. His character had kindness. His character had depth that kind of none of the other characters in this film have. You know what? I just kind of miss Meatloaf a little bit. Maybe not his music, but definitely his acting. He was always fun to see in something.
Another character I really like seeing in this movie is a character actor by the name of Holt McCallany. I love seeing him when he's in stuff. He played the mechanic, he is a mechanic, and he sprays the preacher down with water
that part
during
is so funny.
where you have to, where they're challenged to start a fight, and he's the one spraying the priest down with water. But he's an old character actor who's been in everything forever. I mean, most recently I saw him in Iron Claw, where he plays Fritz Van Erich. He's the dad of the
what's his name?
Van Erichs. Holt McCallany.
All right. If y'all think that we're not on IMDb while we're recording this, you're out of your mind.
Yes, this podcast is brought to you by IMDb.
IMDb, please sponsor us.
IMDb will help you find all of your celebrity and movie trivia needs.
Jesus.
IMDb. There, that's a free one, IMDb. I like his character in this one because he's just that strong presence for a character actor in the background that's not part of the main cast. When he's asked, what do you wish you did with your life? And he's like, build a house. Later on, he's the one who starts up the chanting of his name was Robert Paulson.
Which is
His
so
name was
melodramatic.
Robert
Oh my
Paulson.
God. It's...
Not to be confused with Rob Paulson, who plays Pinky,
And like all the Ninja Turtles.
Yakko, and all the Ninja Turtles, and great
We love you,
voice
Rob
actor.
Paulson.
Yeah, Rob Paulson's amazing.
The character actor that I really enjoyed in this movie is the boss, who's played by Zach Grainer. He's another great character actor who's just been in kind of everything. He was in Deadwood. He was in Ray Donovan, which I know people absolutely love, and The Good Fight, which I know that people absolutely love. And he's just one of those fantastic character actors that pops up and you're like, oh, I like you. So, this film is kind of outside of its main cast of Edward Norton, Brad Pitt, Meatloaf, and Helena Bonham Carter. This film is stacked with really good character actors.
I don't know his name.
And Jared Leto.
I don't. Yeah, of course we've got Jared Leto, but we'll get to him later. There's also, I don't know his name, but I always recognize a character from Band of Brothers.
Eon Bailey.
Yeah, whenever I see him in this movie too, I'm like, ah.
Good for Webster.
Webster.
Webster gets to yell at Meatloaf. Band of Brothers is one of our most favorite series of all times. It's easily in my top 5 favorite TV series of all times. It's a perfect series.
It's my absolute favorite.
World War II story. They were brave men. They were hot men, except for David Schwimmer.
The start of the movie is pretty much the narrator letting us know that he has narcolepsy.
Mm-hmm.
Is it narcolepsy or
No,
is it?
he's in insomnia.
He's an insomniac. So the narrator has insomnia, and he sees his doctor. The doctor pretty much says, "Tough luck." Like,
yeah,
too
just
bad.
Deal with it.
So the narrator has insomnia, isn't getting any help from his doctor, so he decides to, on the only advice from his doctor was to go to a terminally ill therapy groups.
Yes.
But it wasn't like a direct order. The doctor wasn't saying, you need to go to these.
No. It was just, if you want to see sadness, you should go check out the testicular cancer support group.
Right.
Because that's pure sadness.
Right. And the narrator essentially takes this literally and goes to a testicular cancer therapy group, which is where he meets Bob. And then hearing these men's stories was able to let himself...
He had an emotional release at the therapy group, basically. He was a man who was so sort of pent up in his own lack of emotions that he needed the emotional release of a good cry, essentially, which we all need from time to time. And after receiving that good cry, as he just sobs right into Bob's giant man boobs, he's able to sleep for the first time in forever, in a year, in months, in ages. And it becomes his addiction, going to all these different therapy groups and making up sob stories just so that he himself can, have that release of crying, that release of emotions that I guess in the 90s men weren't allowed to feel.
Do you think that part of him was feeling, since he heard these other men's stories, part of him was like, well, at least I'm healthy?
No, I don't think he ever took it as that mindset. I think he was just using it for the sheer sake of being able to finally feel the emotions that he had probably been told all his life that he wasn't allowed to feel. That's kind of how I always took it, is that he was so pent up and unable to process his own feelings that he needed to create these just fantastic lies in order to, have any sort of true release. He was a volcano waiting to go off, basically.
The narrator has been associated with a more feminine character, whereas Marla is more of the masculine character.
Really?
So because the narrator is more into decorating, keeping his apartment full of stuff, decorating, he's really into having...
Is he into that, or is that just what he was told he needed to do? Back in the 90s, IKEA was a huge thing. Everything that is sort of referenced and spoofed and parodied in this film, Starbucks, IKEA, Martha Stewart, all these things were things that were big in the 90s. They were large pop culture phenomenons. Because IKEA really took off in the 90s. And yeah, it's still going today. But so anyway, I don't necessarily feel like he had any interest in being in decorating and filling his house with stuff. I think that he was just doing that to try to fill the empty void that existed within him.
Well, and he does become more in tune with his emotions, which is usually more of a feminine trait. He was going more to the feminine side, which is why Tyler Durden is a hyper-masculine alter ego, because it's the opposite of what the narrator is. Marla, on the other hand, is more masculine, shows more masculine traits, such as acting recklessly, portraying a sense of brazen confidence, and masking her vulnerable state, which is she just wants to be loved, but she's putting up a wall, like a lot of men do. That was kind of like almost not a real gender swap, but
kind of a switch of personalities
that go against type, for especially in the 90s.
Marla's self-esteem is sub-basement level. It is so bad.
I mean, she's on the verge of committing suicide.
So many times.
We see her actually try to commit suicide.
Yeah, like
calls.
Marla's fucked up, and I kind of wonder. We can get into this a bit later, but like the relationship between Marla and Tyler and Marla and the narrator it's just so messed up, man. Like I don't feel like she has any point in this story. Like she has no agency. She is just a plot device. She is just there to be fucked with, and to be fucked over. Ultimately, by the end of this film, she decides she's going to stick around with this dude. Like, I don't get it. This Marla is so clearly written by a man, and it hurts.
Yeah, we can get into the writer of the film, Jim Olds. I don't know many other of his films. He really hasn't written a lot of stuff. He was the writer of Jumper, which, I don't know how many people spent their time watching Jumper. I watched it maybe twice, but...
Which one was that?
That's the one with Hayden Christensen, and he jumps. he's a what do you call it? Like Nightcrawler.
But he can teleport?
Yeah, he's a teleporter.
Oh, I mean, that is the superpower I wish I had most, but still, just Hayden Christensen and he jumps. That's
and then another movie he did was Semper Fi. So a bunch of Marines, like a lot of dude movies.
Apparently, he describes this film as a romantic comedy, explaining it has to do with the character's attitudes towards a healthy relationship, which is a lot of behavior which seems unhealthy and harsh to each other, but in fact does work for them because both characters are out on the edge psychologically. No, they're just these two characters are wildly unhealthy for each other. Like, just because they're both wildly unhealthy people in a wildly unhealthy relationship doesn't mean that makes it a healthy relationship. Like, this is not, two negatives making a positive. This is two negatives making a negative shitstorm. So, I think he's wrong. But...
Yeah, I'm not sure why Marla was written so poorly for the movie. Marla is more fleshed out in the book. Her background is that she had been working at a funeral home. Throughout the novel, Marla grows as her connection to Tyler and the narrator develops, becoming softer and more caring. And then due to her vulnerability, the narrator, or Edward Norton's character, slowly shows his true self to her. It's a much better story on
her character's better in the book.
So much better, and I don't know why. A romantic comedy is not the best for that film, but you could say maybe a little more romantic comedy in the book.
Mm-hmm.
And then Edward Norton seems like he's, I don't know about this film because he was a new actor.
Mm-hmm.
Or not a new actor, but he wasn't as popular as Brad Pitt at the time in '99. But he just wasn't as well known. But
he was more of an indie actor, if anything.
Right, and he seems like he came into this movie probably with a lot of ideas. I know he likes to go against scripts. He doesn't like to stick to his... He likes to change the story up. So I feel like I wouldn't be surprised if he changed some things himself about his own character.
Well, I wonder how much freedom he was given by David Fincher, too, because I know that David Fincher allowed for a lot of improv on this film, from what I was reading on IMDb's trivia section, just the best section on all the internet ever. So I think that he allowed these two men to really kind of figure out the characters themselves, instead of like having them just walk into the molds of who the narrator and Tyler Durden are. I think that Edward Norton and Brad Pitt were given a lot of wiggle room to kind of figure out the characters themselves.
And Helena Bonham Carter, even though Marla's like a really poorly written out, developed female character, she is a antagonist to our main character. But she still is probably one of my favorite on-screen presence during, like, when you watch this film. She just looks like she's having fun.
She is a breath of fresh air, that's for sure.
The way she delivers lines, the way she walks around that set.
Yeah, she's having fun with it for sure.
Later in the film, once we get to the part where Brad Pitt shaves his head and then he just starts wearing like the craziest clothes, just reminds me of all the different tabloid shows or photos that you've ever seen of Brad Pitt in the 90s. Like he just walked in off the street.
90s Brad Pitt was the ultimate douchebag.
Like this is how I showed up to set. This is what I'm wearing for this scene.
Yeah.
This is what Tyler.
The stupid goatee, the spiky blonde hair, like just Tyler Durden is the ultimate 90s douche.
Kind of like the line in Barbie where they talk about Margot Robbie may not have been the best
the best
choice
actress
for this role.
Yeah.
I feel like Brad Pitt may not have been the best choice because he was hired for the part because of his popularity, and I thought he did a great job in this movie. It's one of my favorites with him in it. If you need to send a message about anti-capitalism, and he's got this whole speech about we're not all going to be rock stars or
movie stars meanwhile he's one of the most famous movie stars still on this planet,
right? And may not have been the best choice to deliver a line like that.
I don't know if it was just the beginning of the film, because I kind of stopped watching. Let's be honest, towards the end of it we both sort of kind of retreated into our phones.
I wrote a lot of notes for this movie, but I've seen it a dozen times, maybe more, and I know lines, I know scenes.
Yeah. So you're more aware, you're more in tune with it than I was,
especially towards the end. Everything is just kind of
we all know how the
wrapping
ends.
up.
Yeah.
And,
But I found that Edward Norton's acting in this film is very plastic and stiff, and I think that might have been a choice because at the beginning, when the narrator is deeply unhappy with his life, when he is suffering from insomnia, when he's trying to find an outlet, his body and his motions are just very robotic and stiff. But I guess now that I think about it, he does loosen up by the end of the film once he is finally able to, have those outlets. I also find that this movie is really mean to everyone. It's mean to its characters are mean to each other. The people that they talk about, all of their pop culture references, it's mean to the audience. Like, this movie talks down to you by implying that, like, you know, you're stupid for being a part of a capitalist empire, which we have no choice but to be. You know, you're stupid to have wants and needs that are anything beyond the animalistic side of humanity. Like, I just found that, like, this movie is a big fuck you to everything. And I get that in the 90s there was a lot of angst and there was a lot of how the world was going and people, Gen X growing up and not really knowing what to feel. You know, I understand that it was a product of its time, but now it just feels unnecessary. Like, I feel like we've gone through too much for this film to be really relatable anymore.
I don't think this movie's I don't think you can relate to it. It's more of a nostalgic thing now. It did come out at a very specific time when there was a lot of angst. I also don't remember, like, Chuck Palahniuk writes a lot of raunchy and gory stuff in his books, and he treats a lot of his characters like trash. But I don't really remember this novel being so chauvinistic, even though it is essentially a story about a man not feeling comfortable in the position that he's been told he's supposed to live in. You know, Chuck Palahniuk is a gay man, and he wrote this book because he didn't feel comfortable in a straight man's world. But he tried to be a straight man. He tried to go over to the more like, this is how you're supposed to act. This is what a man is supposed to do.
So he was hiding, basically.
He was. And so one part about this book that people get really wrong is that this is not a message to all men that, you know, being in touch with your feelings or collecting furniture does not make you a sissy.
This story at its core was more about a man coming to terms with himself and who he is as a gay man than just as an angry, toxic man. But that ideal, no matter how lovely that it is, that ideal was so lost in the movie. I even tried to look to see whether or not Edward Norton's character was gay-coded at any point, you know, in the way that he dresses and the way that he acts, but he's not. His character is very, very straight. So I think that nuance was totally lost in the film. Lost by, let's be honest, probably a lot of the fans who have only seen the film and have never read the book. You know what line from Fight Club is unfortunately stuck in my head?
What's that?
The ass or crotch line when Brad Pitt stands up in the
now
airplane.
A question of etiquette. Should I give you the ass or the crotch as I pass by?
Yes, that line. I unfortunately think of that line kind of every time I have to make that choice in a movie theater, an airplane,
yeah, there is
train,
a question of etiquette.
bus.
Do I give you, as I pass you by, do I give you the... And then, of course, he gives Edward Norton the ass, and then he passes the stewardess and gives her the crotch.
Oh my god, ew, David!
Do you think that the scenes, those little, like, quick snippets where Brad Pitt's character is, like, cut into the film for a frame, do you think that those are still clever, or were they just clever then?
I think it's a fun thing of, like, we're following the narrator's brain slowly breaking and his alter ego is trying to get out. We first see Tyler Durden kind of flash at us when the narrator is talking about having insomnia in the copier room. You kind of see him just flash for a moment. Then later when he's talking to his doctor about, or his doctor's telling him about testicular cancer in the hallway, you'll see Brad Pitt flash again. Then he passes by in an airport. Edward Norton's going one way, Brad Pitt is going the other way, and then finally on the airplane is when we finally meet Tyler Durden and his soap, which I think the first clue that they ever give you that they're the same person is when Edward Norton's character notices they have the same exact briefcase.
Is that the first time? Because I take that in like one of the very first lines of this movie. The narrator says, "I know this because Tyler knows this." This is said when the gun's in his mouth and Tyler Durden's talking about
opening scene after.
Yeah, that when I saw the movie again when we watched it yesterday, I was like, oh, that's kind of the first real nod.
Yeah, that is a nod for sure. I missed that one as being a nod. I was more thinking of the. Like, I know this because we're in this Project Mayhem thing together, so we all know this because Project Mayhem knows this, but that is for sure a clue towards his
dissociative identity disorder.
Dissociative. See that?
DID.
I cannot. There you go. DID.
Yeah.
So yeah, they have the same briefcase. Later on, after he gets his little apartment blows up and a flaming pile of IKEA shit falls down to the ground. He calls Tyler. Tyler doesn't pick up.
Memba payphones?
Oh, yeah, member payphones. It only costs $0.25. He calls Tyler for help. Tyler doesn't pick up, and then he Star 69's him.
Yeah.
Hey, remember Star 69?
Remember Star 69? Except payphones can't be called into. You can't call a payphone. In fact, even on... I can't believe I know this off the top of my head. This is something I haven't even looked up. I just know this off the top of my head.
You call it payphone.
You in Fight Club, when the payphone rings and it shows the payphone on the screen, it says in the fine print on the sticker on the payphone that this phone does not ring. Like, you can't call into it. It only rings out. It doesn't ring in. But this movie also might have created a whole generation of people who don't answer their phones. I mean, when was the last time you answered your phone when you didn't know who it was? Right? Like, none of us do that anymore. We're all just waiting for that voicemail to pop up to be like, oh, it was just the dentist calling to confirm your appointment.
Yeah, there's multiple moments. I could go through all of them, but
there's too many.
There's like half a dozen, maybe 8, 10 different moments throughout the movie. They're like, oh, there's another clue.
There's another clue.
That they are not the same,
another
or that they
film
are the same
that
person.
Sort of requires multiple viewing, but not necessarily multiple viewing for the rest of your life. You need to see this movie at least twice to kind of really get it, especially once you know the big twist at the end. You can go back and kind of see the little clues and the little Easter eggs that are hidden around. But at a certain point, like, again, this is not a movie that you put on in the background while you're doing dishes or cleaning the living room. It is a movie that requires some patience and actual care to view it.
In the moment when I probably watched this movie for the first time, it was, the filmmaking aspect of it always interested me. This movie turned me into a David Fincher fan.
You love him.
I collect, like I said, not only, I think this one movie got me interested in Chuck Palahniuk as a writer and David Fincher as a director, and I don't know. And
you have a Chuck Palahniuk shelf, and you also have a David Fincher shelf.
And of both their works, Fight Club is not my favorite thing that David Fincher's done, and it's not my favorite thing that Chuck Palahniuk has done.
Off the top of your head, what's your favorite David Fincher movie?
Off the top of my head, favorite David Fincher movie without looking, I'm going to say it's a tie between The Game and Seven.
Ooh.
I really like 90s David Fincher and he definitely had a style since he started Alien 3 all the way to, I think, Fight Club, since it's 99. The group of movies that came out in the 90s, I think, are his strongest compared to others. However, I would say his modern films, my favorite would probably be Gone Girl.
Which we have to watch 7 and Gone Girl on this list.
They are on this list.
I once promised my mom that I would never watch 7, so I do have to break her heart by watching it. My mom always told me that I was not allowed to watch 7, American History X, or A Clockwork Orange, and I've held that promise to her until I break it later this year with 7. I will not watch American History X. Sorry, Edward Norton, and I will not watch. Oh, Robin, stop it! And I will not watch A Clockwork Orange, because honestly, I just don't care. I know it's fucking twisted, and I don't want to watch it, so I'm not going to.
Because Fight Club, the movie, is such a popular movie, it's been in the pop culture's lexicon as a classic film, essentially.
It's been a pop culture reference for
Forever,
forever.
references forever. I mean, the amount of references for the first rule, you can't talk about it. Second rule, you can't talk about
please, we're not.
That is used over and over so much that when they actually say it in this movie, you're just like, oh God, I get it, I've heard it. But this is, this is the originator.
This movie became a parody of itself, almost a little bit too quickly. People were immediately taking to parodying this film. So it's kind of odd to watch it again, knowing all the beats, but knowing all the beats because of the pop culture world that has grown around it. It's sort of odd. It's odd when this film parodies other movies. He makes a Forrest Gump reference at one point. And it's a little odd that, like, yeah, this movie had a lot of gravitas when it came out, but now it's not a joke, but it's a parody. Like, it's a parody of itself. Because other people have done better Fight Club parodies than Fight Club.
So they essentially decide, hey, let's start a Fight Club.
You know what I found very funny about that, which is another kind of clue that Tyler Durden isn't real? There's no way that a person like Tyler Durden has never been in a fight. If that guy were real, he would be such a dickbag.
Well, he had to convince Edward Norton's character that
to beat him up.
To start fighting, to get into a fight, because Edward Norton's character had never been in a fight before, and how can you really know yourself until you know if you can beat another person up, which makes no sense. But sure, I guess the true test of a man is how hard I can punch you in the face.
Have you ever been punched in the face?
No, so I guess I'm not a man.
Well, that's good.
All right.
One thing I was thinking when I was watching like the montage of men just beating the hell out of each other was that women cuddle. Like, they touch their friends, they hug, they sit closely to each other, they do each other's hair, they, do each other's makeup. Like, women are very physical and touchy with the people in their lives, whereas men aren't. They're not allowed to be. The only way that men can get that same sort of physical release is to beat the shit out of each other, whereas women just like a good hug. Men have to be the fighters, women have to be the carers. I feel like we as a society have kind of gotten away from that a lot. We've very much gotten away from that. But I found that interesting that, like, women are more caring physically than men are, because men weren't, for the longest time, men weren't allowed to be. The whole generational trauma of a bunch of children raised by men who went through war and were traumatized in World War II. They were traumatized by it. They weren't given the appropriate tools to handle the trauma. And then they had to go out and create a new generation of kids and raise those kids in such a way, who then grew up and raised their own kids in such a way. It shows the trickle-down effect of, this huge worldwide, like, traumatic event, and how it kind of has affected now men in the 90s, not knowing how to handle their emotions, not knowing how to process their own thoughts, not knowing if it's okay to be softer. They have to be hard because their parents were raised by parents who had to be hard.
I like how they start out as we're going to just be this private boxing club in bar basements. Which, sure, start a club, whatever. It's when it turned into...
It becomes a thing. Like, it becomes a thing that people are clearly talking about.
Well, they go from just bare-knuckle boxing in bar basements to hooligans committing petty vandalism, pranks, like dumb pranks. Like, we're going to magnetize all these VHS tapes so that they don't work anymore, and then they just jump straight up to domestic terrorists.
Yeah.
Well, as soon as the buildings go down,
they're 100% domestic terrorists. Are we sure they're not just lone wolves who were troubled?
Well, if you look up the definition of incel and see how close it is to it gets really close to describing the men of Project Mayhem.
Do tell.
It's often characterized by deep resentment, hatred, hostility, sexual objectification, misogyny, self-pity, self-loathing, racism, sense of entitlement to sex, that the game is rigged, which a lot of this movie is about the game being rigged because of capitalism, rape culture being okay, endorsement of sexual and non-sexual violence against women, or just sexually active people in general. It doesn't even have to be women or it could be gay people, women, or just
anybody in a
or
happy
just a straight
relationship.
married couple.
Yeah.
Yeah, any kind of happy relationship they're going to be.
Did Fight Club create incels, or did Fight Club just give a voice to incels?
You think it would have been a good idea, maybe, for the narrator to seek, I don't know, therapy, maybe?
Oh,
instead
everybody
of
in this
going-
movie needs some therapy.
Instead of going to punch people in the face?
Yeah, no, like everybody in this film needs therapy. But that also kind of goes to show that in the 90s, therapy wasn't a joke, but it was definitely something that was not more readily available to everyone the way that it is these days.
It was one of those things like, well, you don't need to go to therapy if you don't have any problems. And
Yeah.
you don't.
And your therapy can just be beating the shit out of somebody instead of actually confronting the issues in your own head. But can we talk about, just for a second, the uncanny valley sex scene that Tyler Durden and Marla have? Which, again, I don't think the CG really holds up. I don't think the special effects in this movie really hold up, because that uncanny valley sex scene is so awkward.
There are some... Yeah, that's a weird one.
Yeah.
It looks like some CGI scan was taken of them and then they got stretched out. Or
It was like
morphed.
bullet time
Bullet-
sex scene, which was just so unnecessarily gross. But then again, there's a lot of unnecessary gross in this film. This movie is meant to be unnecessarily gross. I've got an idea for a remake, and or at least who would play who if they remade this movie today. What do you think about Austin Butler as Tyler Durden, Timothée Chalamet as the narrator, and Zendaya as Marla?
Wow.
I know that I'm just like picking from Dune 2,
Recreating Dune 2.
but I was trying to think, like, I feel like Austin Butler would play Tyler Durden very well. I'm not a huge fan of him as an actor, but I can see the look. I can see the douchiness, the swagger. Like, I could see him taking over kind of any Brad Pitt character from the 90s. And then I was trying to think of somebody who was, like, dorky and uncool, but I don't know a lot of the newer generation of male actors. So I was like, well, maybe Timothée Chalamet or one of the kids from Riverdale.
I was going to say, if you want somebody who's good at looking dorky, but also a really good actor... I can't remember his name right this moment, but the lead from Saltburn.
Oh, Barry Keoghan.
Barry Keoghan, yeah.
He would make a great
Narrator.
I would thoroughly enjoy. I think he's a fantastic actor, but I would thoroughly enjoy watching his face get beat in.
Speaking of liking to watch somebody's face get beat
Oh
in
my
to
God.
a hamburger pulp.
Best part about this movie is watching Jared Leto get the shit kicked out of him. Oh, it's a beautiful thing. This movie deserves Oscars just for that scene. In fact, this movie deserves to still be famous just for that scene, because Jared Leto is the worst.
I love watching something beautiful be destroyed before my eyes.
Yeah.
And, it just happens to be Jared Leto.
He's just so pretentious, and he's just so pompous. And, like, he kind of has a cult devoted just to him. And, honestly, I'm always super...
Didn't he start a cult?
Yeah. That's all about him.
Yeah.
Because, of course, it is.
But it's a literal cult, not a figurative one.
Like, he's in everything. And it's unfortunate. They just released an image of Tron 3. And I know Caveman his shoulders just dropped and he pulled a face. Like,
Well, it's like when I found out that he was in...
Haunted Mansion?
No.
Oh, when I found out he was in Haunted Mansion, I did not want to see Haunted Mansion. I watched that trailer and went, oh, this looks fun. Oh, I'll watch this. Oh. Well, never mind. As soon as his name flashed on screen.
No, when I found out that he was in Blade Runner 2049,
He was in Blade Runner 2049?
Even though it's a really small part, he's not on screen a lot, you could cut all his scenes out and it'd be the same movie. Which is mostly everything he does, except for maybe Morbius. I mean, I guess if you...
It's Morbin time.
I guess if you cut him out of Morbius, it would
Would
still
Morbius have been a better film?
Yeah, it would just be Matt Smith dancing around.
Which I'm not opposed to.
Right. And I thought that would be a fun part of Morbius.
Mm-hmm.
But then when I watched it, even Matt Smith dancing around wasn't enough to save Morbius.
Well, I mean, what Sony is doing to its Marvel properties could be a whole nother podcast on its own right. But let's talk about Meatloaf for a second. I think that he's probably the best actor in this film. Or at least, again, going back to his characters, is the one that I cared for the most. As I was watching him, I thought that Meatloaf and Patrick Swayze could have played brothers in a film, and I'm sad that we never got that. I kind of feel like they had the same physicality, and it would have been fun to see them together, and I'm sad that we'll never get that chance. And I also kind of wondered what Meatloaf and Jared Leto talked about between scenes when they were standing on that porch, waiting to be let into Project Mayhem. You know, do you think they talked music? Do you think they talked life? Or do you think that Jared Leto was just a dick the whole time?
Tried to stay in character the entire time and just ignored him.
Oh, God, that's another reason why he's so obnoxious. Oh, also, let's talk about the boss scene, because watching Eddie Nortz beat the hell out of himself to frame his boss and to get money and travel certificates and all that thing, that is such a satisfying scene. It's such a funny scene.
It is a funny scene. It's probably the funniest scene in the movie.
I think so, too. It's one of the few scenes that I thoroughly enjoyed. Because, like, who wouldn't want to get back at their boss like that? Me, personally, at the moment, now I like my boss a bit too much. But I've had some bosses. It's
also another scene that shows, or kind of hints towards them being the same person.
Because you kind of see how he beats the hell out of himself.
This is how he beats himself up. And which you do later see a clip of him beating himself up in front of a bar, and that's why if I was standing outside of a bar and saw a guy punching himself in the face, that would not make me go, hey, you want to start a fight club?
No. I'd be like, the fuck is wrong with you?
This guy has some issues.
And now he's beating himself up, now he wants to beat me up?
You know what? I'll pass today.
Thanks, but no thank you.
Sleep off this hangover.
Kind of leading into the whole Edward Norton's character having DID and having this, you know, these two personalities, the one-sided car conversation where they're driving in the rain, presumably somebody is driving the car, so it is Edward Norton / Tyler Durden is physically driving the car. But he is then having a full screaming match conversation between his two personalities with two people just in the back seat. And those guys must have been scared shitless. Do you think that those two guys were just like, what did we get ourselves into? Like, this guy's nuts.
They are so devoted. I mean, the way that they just scream from the back, we do not talk about Project Mayhem.
Yeah.
I think that was a smart move on Tyler Durden's part to put in place if the
kind of rules to not question his
rules to
own
not
insanity.
Question my insanity.
Mm-hmm. Imagine sitting in the back seat of a car, speeding down a highway in the rain, you know, listening to the driver yelling at himself in a full conversation. Like, that whole scene is crazy intense, especially once you know the twists of the movie.
Well, and then the car crashes, and when he crawls out from the car crash, Edward Norton is crawling out from the driver's side. It's flipped over.
Yeah.
So now the driver's side is facing downhill, and he crawls out.
But Brad Pitt.
Tyler crawls out of the passenger side and
pulls him out. Interesting.
But since we're talking about Edward Norton's physical body driving the car,
he was in the driver's seat.
Him out of the driver's
I never
seat.
Clocked that. So it is a clever film. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm not hating on it because it's not well done.
It hasn't aged well.
It just hasn't aged well.
That's really and there are going to be some other movies on this list that did not age well.
Yeah.
But that's the thing about film being created. It's created in a vacuum.
Yeah. It's a product of its time. Especially, and that's why certain films where they don't reference what's happening during that decade, they don't reference they're not
famous people or other movies or pop culture in general, because they become timeless and then they age well, especially if they are movies that don't degrade women or gays or
it's the world at large.
At large.
Yeah, because this movie is so mean to everyone. Caveman, what city is this film set in? Is it ever acknowledged, or is it just supposed to be any random metropolis?
Any town USA that's got skyscrapers with a lot of credit card records.
Which I guess, that this movie only could have been made then because
where there is no cloud.
There was no cloud. There was no digital. I mean, in '99, there was probably starting to become a digital backup of people's credit card debt. But do you think they really did just erase all the debt? So these people had a bunch of cardboard boxes filled with papers saying that John Smith owes $100,000 on his house loan. And then it went up in flames and the bank just went, okay, well, we don't have proof, so we'll just ignore it. That's not how the world works. Not even then.
Which at the time when I saw this and saw the buildings fall, I was like, really? Is that all it takes is just blowing up a building and now your debt's gone?
You're debt free.
Like
you can't even escape debt in death. Especially not these days, but definitely back then.
It makes for a good ending on film, seeing all these buildings crumble down around you. The Pixies music starts turning on, it starts swelling up, getting louder, and then, movie ends and you just see a big dick at the end and, yay, that was a fun movie. Whereas in the book, the narrator is waiting for an explosion to kill him because he is also in a building that's wired to go. I'm a little fuzzy with the book. It's been a while since I read the book, but I believe that they are being held. I believe that they're being held in a museum. Mm-hmm. And Tyler's plan is for the building next to them to explode and then land on them and kill himself,
ruin
and Marla, and that's Tyler's plan. But the explosion never happened. There was a malfunction,
and he's not caught by the authorities or anything. Like
the narrator, no, he just like the movie, he shoots himself in the mouth, but then wakes up in a mental institute, and a group of the hospital employees are surround him at his side, and they present themselves as members of Project Mayhem, assuring him that Tyler's plans will
continue,
and they await for Tyler's return.
So I haven't read the book. I've kind of flipped through the graphic novel for Fight Club 2. I don't care. Let's be real honest. I didn't care.
And there's a Fight Club 3 too.
There's a Fight Club 3?
There is a Fight Club 3.
Do you own it?
Just in individual issues, not a hardcover.
Jesus Christ. So here's my question. And how in God's name does Marla Singer stay with a guy like Tyler Durden?
That's a fair question.
He is. How does that couple not only thrive but then have a child?
See, between Fight Club and Fight Club 2, they get married, they have a kid.
That's insane. It's insane. That couple should never. Those two should be as far away from each other as physically possible.
By Fight Club 2, they're split up again, I think. There's a lot that happens in Fight Club 2 and 3, and it's actually a really fun
story.
Comic book issues to get through. And it's only, I think, each Fight Club 2 is 10 issues, Fight Club 3 is 10 issues, and
so it's a limited run. Are they proper canon to the books? It's a proper, or is it? I guess it'd have to be.
It is canon to his book.
Can we also talk about the sort of strange normalcy of hearing the Pixies, "Where Is My Mind," playing in the grocery store while you're shopping for your vegetables? It's a very odd thing to hear a song like that, because that song, because of this movie, that song was a big thing.
Where is my mind? Where is my mind?
Yeah, I think this song gained popularity because
of the film. So it's very weird to hear it just being played in your grocery store, kind of with a mix of other random nostalgic 90s songs or, early 2000 songs. I've heard Madonna's Like a Virgin in a grocery store. And when that song came out, it was like the WAP of its time. I still contend that one day you're going to be buying your groceries and you're going to be listening to WAP on the speakers and everybody will just have accepted it.
So to compare this movie to our other episodes we've done, this is yet another film that is about a man descending.
He descends.
I mean, Tyler literally tells him that he needs to hit rock bottom on purpose. We are forcing you to... He forces him to get rid of all of his possessions by blowing them up. Edward Norton's character is brought down to rock bottom by Tyler. It's a character that you never see recover from that. He hits rock bottom and he stays rock bottom. And even in Fight Club 2 and 3, the man is just always getting fucked over and punched down. So Maggie, out of 5 stars, what would you give Fight Club?
2. And it's a barely 2. I give it 2 for Meatloaf and for the scene where Edward Norton beats himself up with the boss. That's it. Those are the 2 scenes that I really, truly cared about. I wanted to care about Marla. I just couldn't. I wanted to feel for her. I couldn't. I just couldn't handle her as a character. I don't like Brad Pitt or Edward Norton's characters. Like, this movie for me is just a crawled 2, in my opinion.
I would have to give... Well, okay, so if we're talking to the version of Caveman that watched this in early 2000s, he would have given this movie a 5 automatically. Back then, that version of me definitely loved this movie. But I was never one of the guys who... I think I understood what the movie was trying to say.
Mm-hmm. You weren't seeing all the wrong reasons to love it. You loved it for what it was, not what it was saying.
I think for the longest time I was loving it because, I liked watching movies with guys fighting each other,
mm-hmm.
especially Arnold Schwarzenegger. And
who doesn't still like watching movies of people fighting?
And so just seeing the bare knuckle boxing happening, all those scenes were always interesting to me. The filmmaking aspect of this, the style that David Fincher uses in his films, even with the maybe not, some say good CGI, some say not so good for 1999. However, now you ask me what I would rate this film, and I have less interest in this movie as the years have gone by. Like I said, this isn't my favorite Chuck Palahniuk or even David Fincher project, but I still like it for more nostalgic reasons because it got me into those artists. So probably a 3.5, and the half was probably because I like David Fincher so much.
And that's okay. I mean, you're allowed to like this film still.
When I give threes is, to me, 3 is an average. So this is just slightly above average film for me.
But is that based purely on nostalgia?
This is based off of everything. Just from top to bottom, nostalgia, liking Chuck Palahniuk and David Fincher, but also realizing that this movie has not aged very well. And, whenever I rank a film, whether it's rating it by stars or ranking it above or below other movies, my rankings always move around because the times change, my feelings change, my mood, depending on, maybe when I first saw a certain movie in the theater, maybe I was happy, maybe I was sad, and so that's going to have that's going to show
everything
on the way I feel about a movie. Completely fine rating for...
Why do you think Fight Club is so high on the list? Well, and because this is
true, we are on number 5.
This is number 5. I mean, actually, this movie is number 4 on the top 60 list that Letterboxd put out.
Right.
It's only the 5th podcast because we cut Spirited Away into it. So why do you think this movie is still so popular? Is it because men associate with it and they find what they need to find in it? Is it because people just feel like this movie is better than it actually is? Is it nostalgia?
The average rating on
Letterboxd
right now is a 4.3. I have a work friend who I follow on Letterboxd who gave it a 5. I follow somebody on YouTube who gave it a 4.
Do you think it's just for what this movie was?
I think
not necessarily what it is, but what it was, the way that this movie hit. Because pop culturally, this movie hit.
In the world of pop
hard.
culture, it was a huge film. I mean, I kind of forgot to talk about this part, but one of the most popular lines that I'd ever heard that kept on repeating over and over and over, whether it was in a clip for something else or a trailer showing off other 20th Century Fox films. It would always be in there. And you think it would be the first rule of Fight Club is you don't talk about Fight Club, but it always ended up being,
I want you to hit me as hard as you can.
I love that line. I love that scene. I love that David Fincher, before they filmed that scene, David Fincher pulled Edward Norton aside and said, I want you to hit Brad Pitt right in the ear when you do this. So Brad Pitt's reaction of getting hit in the ear and yelling, why the ear, was all a real reaction from Edward Norton actually hitting him in the ear. But I think this film just keeps getting ranked high because it was such a good film
at its time.
At its time, and I don't know, the people that I follow on Letterboxd, it may have been a while since they've seen it. Before I rewatched it for this podcast, it had been a few years, and when you really start watching it and listening to certain things, especially in a podcast where you have to talk about it again and you're writing notes down. So a lot more is getting into your...
Yeah, you pick up on a lot more. You pick up, and especially because we're doing this in 2024, in 25 years, the world has changed.
A movie that comes out tomorrow that we all think is completely
amazing,
fine and amazing, 30 years from now can be looked back on like, ugh, I can't believe people thought like that 30 years ago.
So, sorry to my little Jesus Christ there, which interrupted your speech, and I do apologize. I was paying attention. But I happened to be also working on my review on Letterboxd for Fight Club. And when I hit published, a little thing pops up that says, you're about to break the first and second rules of Fight Club. Publish anyway? ? Jesus Christ. I'm so tired of that stupid joke about, you have the first rule of Fight Club. Like, it has been done to death. So even when something cute like that pops up on an app, I still roll my eyes and just kind of hate it a little bit more. If I almost want to drop my rating down to 1.5 purely for that dumb little Letterboxd Easter egg, just because I just hate it. I'm so tired of it. But this film was never for me back in 1999. It's still not a film for me, and that's fine. If you like it, if you love it, great. As long as you're not taking away the wrong message.
And even though I was 18 when this movie came out, it's rated R. I could finally watch a rated R film. Like I said, I didn't get around to it until it was out on DVD. I bought it at Best Buy.
Oh, Best Buy.
Yeah, back when they
actually
had
sold such a great DVD collection.
Yeah, back when they sold physical media. But instead, the movie that caught my eye in 99 was The Matrix. And The Matrix still holds up to me. I mean, we're going to find out how we really feel about it.
Does it?
I know. We're going to really, since that's another movie that you're not
I'm
super
not
excited
super thrilled about having to watch The Matrix. That though, I mean, The Matrix is in the 50s, so it's going to be a while until we get to The Matrix.
Sure, but just even though it's still a movie from the 90s, it doesn't look like it's from the 90s because The Matrix was so ahead of its time. It holds up. I feel like, and this is me saying it without having seen it in a while.
Yeah, I think the last time we watched The Matrix 1 was right before The Matrix 4 came out. It's going to be interesting to see how, because we have to watch The Joker immediately after this. You've seen The Joker. You didn't really like it. I have not seen The Joker. I do not want to watch it. So it's going to be interesting to see how I feel about The Joker. I mean, I'm going into it with a pretty grumpy attitude. And I'm going to try really hard not to let that, let's be honest, it's going to color all of my decisions that I make about that movie. But it's going to be interesting to compare those two films. So next week should be a fun listen.
Next week should be really interesting. I only watched Joaquin Phoenix's Joker once, and Maggie has been avoiding
dead set against it since it was announced.
That is going to be a really interesting podcast of us getting back into it and talking about how we felt about that one.
Yeah, it'll be fun. It'll be fun to me to have a fully formed opinion on this film, because my opinion on it was always just no. So it'll be fun to actually really expand on that thought process. I'm a little worried that I might love it. Wouldn't that be funny? If like I watched this movie and I was just like, Jesus, this is incredible.
I would be incredibly shocked.
Yeah, I would be too.
What a podcast that will make.
But I guess you'll have to find out next week whether or not that happens.
So Maggie.
Yes, Caveman.
I have 2 questions for you.
Okie dokie.
So the first question is, would Oscar Isaac have made Fight Club better?
1,000% yes. I would like Oscar Isaac to reprise his role as Mark Spector and Stephen Grant from Moon Knight, a character that actually does have dissociative identity disorder and was treated a lot better than Tyler Durden was, for sure. And I would like to see Mark and Steven kick down the door of the Paper Street Soap Company and beat the ever-loving shit out of every single person in there. And then go take Tyler to get some much-needed therapy. Because, that's how Oscar Isaac could make Fight Club better, is if Stephen Grant and Mark Spector were there, perfect as they are, to just take care of all of these idiots.
And my second question for you is, which character would Oscar Isaac play to make this movie better?
Oh, I just answered that. Do I have to pick a character do I have to pick a character?
You have to pick a character that's in Fight Club.
That Oscar Isaac would
Yeah, he's always playing a certain character.
I would like to see Oscar Isaac. I think Oscar Isaac actually legitimately would have done a very good job as the narrator role. I think he would have been a lot more believable and a lot more, he would have had a lot more depth to that character, kindness and sadness and anger to that character than I think Edward Norton would have been able to actually portray. But I still contend that I would rather he be Stephen Grant and Mark Spector coming in and kicking ass and taking names.
I think I would have liked to see him in the Meatloaf role or the Jared Leto role.
You want to see Oscar Isaac with bitch tits?
Sure.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't
Or
deny
just
that either.
Or just a scene where he gets his face punched in.
Wow.
Bloody pulp.
What? Why?
No reason.
Oh, sure.
Welcome to Movie Mingle's film reviews and box office news, where I, Caveman, am going to cover this last week's box office numbers. But first, I want to give my review of the latest film I saw in theaters, Love Lies Bleeding. I wrote this review earlier, so let's check it out together. I call this Love Lies Bleeding, a riveting tale of love, loss, and redemption. Oh yeah. No, seriously, Love Lies Bleeding, which is the latest film from A24, is a journey through the complexities of human relationships, brilliantly brought to life by an outstanding cast and the visionary direction of Rose Glass, who you may know from Saint Maud, was another A24 film. But we're talking about Love Lies Bleeding. At the heart of the film lies the captivating performances of Kristen Stewart, Katie O'Brien, Dave Franco, and Ed Harris. Kristen Stewart's portrayal is raw and emotionally charged, drawing viewers into the world of her character with every expression. O'Brien delivers a fantastic performance, filling her role with strength and vulnerability. Franco and Harris add depth to the cast, making everyone shine on screen. Director Rose Glass does a very good job as well. She fills this movie with love, loss, and redemption against a backdrop of stunning cinematography and a really great soundtrack. From the intimate moments of quiet introspection to the heart-pounding tension of pivotal scenes, Rose Glass navigates the emotional landscape of the film, keeping audiences on the edge of their seats until the very end. In a world where movies are often dominated by cookie-cutter plots and predictable endings, Love Lies Bleeding is really nice to see, offering a thought-provoking and emotional experience that will stay with viewers long after the credits. It's a testament to the power of storytelling and a shining example of the magic that can happen when a talented cast and crew come together to create something truly extraordinary. In my conclusion, Love Lies Bleeding is a must-see film for anyone who appreciates original storytelling and great performances. It reminds me of the power of love that can be found even in life's darkest moments. All right, and this brings us to box office news. This is based off of the March 16th to 18th weekend. And of course, just like the weekend before, Kung Fu Panda 4 is still number one with another $30 million, totaling $107 million so far. Dune 2 is right behind it with another $28 million, so only a couple million lower, with a domestic gross of $204 million, bringing its worldwide total to $500 billion. In third place, we have Arthur the King, which is the newest Marky Mark movie with a dog, because that's where his career has gone. And that brought in $7 million for its first weekend. And then we're just going to skip to sixth place, where we have Love Lies Bleeding with $2.5 million, and that's only 3 days. It's only in 1,000 theaters. It's an inexpensive A24 film, and I'm hoping that it at least starts picking up a little traction through word of mouth, which is why I'm doing this. And I really think more people should go watch it and tell your friends. And that concludes Movie Mingle's film reviews and box office news.
And that's this week's episode of Movie Mingle. We hope you enjoyed it. We hope that you don't have too many angry opinions about how we view Fight Club. But if you do, you can reach out to us at movieminglepod@gmail.com. We are also on Instagram at movieminglepod. We are also on Letterboxd at movieminglepod. You can follow us on Letterboxd and see how I, Maggie, am rating all the films that we are currently watching for this list. Spoiler alert, Fight Club is very low. It's the bottom. It's right there at the bottom. And yeah, we hope that you join us next week for The Joker, which should be a very fun conversation, no matter how it ends up going. And we can't wait to have you. Until then, we'll see you at the movies. Now go mingle.
Are you an effective team?
We are an effective team.
Let them fight.
How did you just do that? I'm a really good lawyer.
Here on Caladan, we ruled by air power and sea power. On Arrakis, we need to cultivate desert power.
Welcome, Mr. Beach. What's that bond? I'm a little confused.
Well, we wouldn't want that, would we?
I don't want to brag, but I will. I was in the Avengers.
The Avengers?
Yeah.
That's great.
Thank you.
What is that?
I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse.
Toga, 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 toga.